Hello. Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café. Today's Wednesday, December 12th, and this actually will be, I'm going to take a little hiatus. Just wanted to let you know for Christmas break. I'll be doing a little Christmas traveling. We're going to conclude this year's sessions by finishing this arrangement of Silent Night that we started last week. This is where we got to last week, and it's a really nice start in the sense of having, a good harmonization. And really what I want to talk about is just taking this to the next step, the next level, as far as actually making it something other than just these dotted half notes in the accompaniment. And what I said that I wanted to focus on was writing idiomatically for piano. And yeah, I'm going to talk about that, but I also want to talk about a little more generally what what it means to take music with a harmony and to arrange it, because really the way you arrange for piano isn't necessarily all that different from how you would go about arranging for a vocal ensemble or an orchestra or anything else in terms of some of the basic principles. And so really I want to focus a little more on the basic principles and just talk a little bit about piano specific things. So as always, I'm going to encourage people, if anyone's watching live, I mean, I know a few people are watching live, anyone who is watching live, feel free to make suggestions, comments, ask questions, whatever, and I'll try to keep my eye on the chat. One of the things that I want to emphasize is this basic structure we have of a melody, excuse me, a melody in the top voice, the roots of the chords mostly on the bottom. I think there was one place where I used an actual inversion here. This is a second inversion chord used in the traditional classical way that we use second inversion chords. Then, let's see, let me get rid of this little text stream here that's left over from before. All right, so I have the melody on top, I have the roots mostly on the bottom in the bass, and then I have these inner voices that are helping to fill out the chord. And I have exactly 4 notes everywhere. This 4-note structure is a very, very powerful technique. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously if you don't sing in choirs, but this arrangement of a top voice in soprano, a bottom voice in bass, and then these middle voices, alto and tenor, are this SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, is the most traditional way of sort of thinking about how you're going to spread the notes out in your chord. And it's very appropriate to think in those terms, and all these rules we learn about how to arrange for SATB in a music theory course. A lot of those same things apply whether you're talking about arranging for an actual SATB choir, or if you're arranging for, say, a string quartet, or the string section in an orchestra, or the brass section in an orchestra. The same basic techniques apply, and they also apply to the piano. The piano's capable of playing more than 4 notes at once, but we often it's good to think about things in this way. Think about the outer voices first, defining the melody and the roots, the bass, and then the inner voices helping to fill out the chord. And yeah, maybe there'll be more than 2 notes in the inner voices. Sometimes there might only be 1. When you're writing for piano, you don't necessarily have to account for all 4 voices, right? If you're writing for a choir, you've always got sopranos, altos, tenor, basses, so if you don't write a note for the altos, then they do nothing during that measure. And maybe that's fine, maybe that's what you want. On piano, you don't necessarily have to even think in those terms, but normally you start from a perspective of thinking about 4 notes. Really, when I'm teaching piano, or teaching like people how to play the piano from a lead sheet, I think I make this picture a lot. This picture is meant to say, here's my melody in my right hand, here's the roots in my left hand, but then I have these my inner hand, so to speak, where I'm playing these inner voices. So I have the melody hand, the bass hand, and the chord hand. This is where we're going to fill in the rest of the chord. And so we're going to take this same basic SATB structure and just sort of scatter the notes out as necessary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add another instrument here that's an actual piano instrument, and then we're going to copy and paste and do whatever else we need to do. And again, you're going to see my developer chat messages because I haven't figured out how to turn those off. We're just really zooming towards a MuseScore 3 release, and probably by the time we resume these cafes in January, there's a good chance that MuseScore 3 will be out the door, and I'll be able to talk about that. Anyhow, I'm still using MuseScore 2 for this demo, just to make sure we don't run into any problems that kind of derail what we're trying to do here. So what I want to do is I'm going to copy the whole first line of melody to the top line of the piano part. So I used copy and paste. And this reminds me that, as per usual, I would be much better off if I had my thing set up so you can see the shortcuts. So boom, that does it. At least I know how to get it enabled pretty quickly. I'm also going to, well, I think I'm going to just leave it at that for right now. Because one of the things that we could do, if you're trying to write SATB for choir, then a hymn style, you typically have pretty much the same exact rhythms. So what I might actually do is harmonize each of these notes using the notes from the alto part here. And yeah, I could try to manipulate copy and paste and selection filter and explode. There's commands that could try to automate some of this process for me. To be honest, figuring out exactly how to do that is going to be more trouble than it's worth. If I were entering this, I would just re-enter the notes and think I want an E down in this octave. Ooh, and you should be hearing this, right? So let's get my sound up to my appropriate volume level here. Silent, and then night. Oops, I meant 6.C. And then down in the bottom staff, I would enter in the top voice silent, night. And then in the bottom voice, I would enter probably the same rhythm. Oops. I think I forgot to switch to voice 2, didn't I? So voice 2. Silent. Night. So if I were writing for a choir, I would probably think about starting like this. Oh, and at this point, I don't really need to hear any staff but the piano staff that I just added. So let me go to the mixer, F10, and mute my other staves. So this is the melody staff on top. This is that temporary, you know, the 3 extra voices here. This is my actual piano thing. So actually, instead of muting those, I think I'm going to solo this. That's probably a little more clever. So if I was doing a hymn style arrangement for a choir, I would start off this way. But now the first thing I would notice is, gee, there's nothing going on in this measure, right? You normally would expect something rhythmically to go on in those next few beats. So if you're writing a hymn style arrangement of this, then you might also want to have accompaniment. I mean, the original had guitar accompaniment, I believe. You would have, if you were writing for a choir and you didn't have accompaniment, you would think about doing things with the inner voices, and so that maybe instead of just that, you would have some moving things. So at this point, I'm actually going to see, can you see the piano? I was trying to position this so that you would actually be able to see the piano keys. You kind of can, but I'm going to be blocking it. But anyhow, you'll get an idea. If I play this exactly what I have written, what I could do is I just took this C here and moved it so that in quarter notes I had something moving. The piano's pretty out of tune. Right? I could do that kind of thing, creating moving lines within the alto and tenor mostly. That's where I would expect to do it. So if I was writing specifically for a choir or for, say, a string quartet or any sort of instrumental ensemble, that's the kind of thing I would do. And then I would just carry that through pretty much all the way across. I'd copy these bass notes down into voice 2, these tenor notes here into voice 1 here, these alto notes into voice 2 here, and then I would look at places to introduce little bits of motion. That's how I would do this if I was arranging it for a choir. However, in fact, let me just add yet another staff. Why not? They're free. I'm going to add another piano, and so this one, did I not add it? Dang it. Double click it. All right. So now I'll go to the mixer and I'm going to silence this one and instead go for this one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about a little more idiomatic writing for piano. This idea of having this all the notes moving together, boom, 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 that isn't very pianistic. Pianistic writing tends to be a little more flowing, a little more arpeggiated. I mean, not that you can't ever play chords all together, but there tends to be more arpeggiation going on. And that's a way of creating motion when you want it. I mean, you could certainly have, let me just play also. I could do something like, I could have just repeating chords like that, and that's a thing. You have to be careful when writing, when you take the whole left hand and just play chords like that, because if you do it too low, that's too muddy down there. My general rule writing for piano is don't have anything but the root more than an octave below middle C. So this note right here is sort of like a wall where I try to avoid putting anything below there other than the bass. I don't let the tenor notes get lower than that, in other words. That's not necessarily, well, that's actually fairly well in keeping with the range, the general range guidelines that you would use writing for a SATB choir as well. It's not like a hard and fast limit like a violin that just can't go any lower than its low G string. It's not like that, but it's a general guideline. I try not to keep, I try to keep the root there or below, that C here or below, but have nothing else any lower than that. So if I play this F chord in root position, it's going to be too low. If I play it up here, well, that's fine, but now I'm going, and it's a lot of jumping from here to here. That's a big jump for the hand. It's not unplayable, but it's not smooth. Plus, this F doesn't feel like it's as much in the bass range as it could be. In fact, even in the SATB version, I might do this. Now here, you have to think, this F is, any professional choir, the basses can sing that F. However, if you're dealing with well, even like a good amateur choir. But you definitely have to think a little twice about this, that in some context, G is probably the lowest you want to go for the bass. As you can tell, I'm a bass when I sing, which I don't really sing, but I have an F in the morning, and then the E starts to drop off. By the evening, that F is questionable like that E is for me. You know, real singers can do it, but that's the point. It's not always when you're writing are they real singers. If you're just like writing an arrangement to maybe get your caroling group to go out and sing, you know, maybe your basses really aren't going to be able to do that. Anyhow, when you're writing for piano, though, we've got all these keys down here. I like to be able to use them. And if we use arpeggiation patterns, we can get the bass down here while still keeping the tenor up here. I can barely play that F and A together. It's a stretch for me. As a professional pianist, I'm a pretty small person, and I have small hands, but my fingers stretch out pretty wide, so I'm able to make this interval here, this tenth, but only barely, and only in the easy cases, white key to white key, basically. So you really don't want to write a lot of tenths to be played simultaneously. And an octave is always safe. Ninths would be pretty safe too, but they're not as useful from playing an F and a G at the same time. Most people can manage that, but it's not as useful as being able to play tenths. Luckily, we can like take these two facts, the fact that I want to have this tenth, but I can't play it together, but I also want to have rhythmic motion. Well, I can combine those two facts and solve both problems at once by using a technique that I call the 5 and 10. Now, if you're familiar with the idea of a dollar store, there's stores called the dollar store. That's the modern version of what used to be called a 5 and 10, meaning a store where everything costs 5 or 10 cents. I guess in countries countries outside the United States, maybe there's something else equivalent, some equivalent slang you would use for this. But anyhow, the 5 and 10 cent store would be a store where everything costs 5 or 10 cents. That's the equivalent of what we now call a dollar store. 5 and 10, though, is very in keeping with how I might want to arrange for piano. So what I might want to do is have like C, and then the fifth of the chord, and then the 10th, like that. But I could actually do that whole thing an octave lower. And then maybe keep that same top part. What did I do? See, when there we go. All right. So I can do the same thing maybe here. I don't necessarily need that moving part here, but I'm going to keep it anyhow. And then here, I'm going to do a 5 and 10 also. Oops. So this type of pattern, which is a literal 5 and 10, that is a really powerful way of writing for the piano, using that kind of 5 and 10 pattern like that. Now, in this case, it's literally root, 5th, 10th, root, 5th, 10th, and I might keep that going some of the time, but often it's not great voice leading, right? The root here connects to this root. You should think of this as a chord, 3 notes at once, and this is 3 notes at once, and try to make the voice leading from one measure to the next be good at least some of the time. That's another thing where part of what is involved in writing for piano is making judgment calls there. So if I jump to here, this is bad voice leading, right? If I played that as a 3-note chord, and then okay, sorry, you know that song. This to here is not good voice leading, so I could think about changing it to this, changing the top note to only be the F instead of the A, so that at least the top note of the voice leading only has to go a step rather than leaping up to that A. And then I would just want to make sure that I cover that A somewhere in the top part, which is certainly doable. So let me just make that little adjustment. I hit caps lock accidentally. All right, so I'm going to go and maybe I'll just keep this as a dotted half note. So that is what I could do. Let me play it from MuseScore. So that's totally doable. I'd have to think about whether I really want to even repeat that E, right? Because why repeat that E, given that the E is down here? I also could get a better voice leading out of this if I changed that to a C. Now when I do this, I have now created parallel fifths. And here's another thing. When you're writing for piano in this type of setting, parallel fifths are not the evil thing that we are taught in music theory courses. It's a sound, it's a particular sound to be avoided in a particular context. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, really. But, you know, whatever. It is what it is. So really, what I think I might do is just keep this as the dotted half. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. So coming from a jazz perspective, triads are not really my thing. This isn't a triad. This has a major seventh in the melody, and so already that's probably stretching things for some people. The fact that I've harmonized this with the melody as the major seventh. To my jazz ears, that's perfectly normal, but it's still pretty vanilla here. For my purposes, I would love ninths in these chords. This is like, it's not even a jazzism. That's really a popism, to be honest. So what I've done is added a ninth here, and down in that octave. And then I did that, and then I let this resolve. So I made this a quarter note, and then let it resolve to a C there, and then held that out an extra beat. That's basically what I did. So in this case, now we still have our parallel fifths, but they're a little more disguised because this isn't hitting simultaneously. So I think I'm going to leave it like that. By the way, had I been using MuseScore 3, I am fairly certain that these lyrics would have automatically moved down to avoid the stems here. It would have automatically created space there. That's one of the nice new features that you'll have to look forward to in MuseScore 3. But I don't really need the lyrics. Since this is a piano arrangement, I'm not going to need the lyrics, so I'm just going to maybe delete them. So I'm going to just do the next couple measures and probably call that good, because if I were to go through this whole piece, that would take forever, and I want to show you the techniques, and then maybe some of you guys might want to try to finish this on your own and upload it, and then drop a line in the comment to your finished version of this. I would kind of like to see that. What kind of arrangements people make starting from this harmonization. I'll upload the harmonization for you, and then maybe you can upload your own versions. That would be kind of fun. I'm doing that, by the way, in my online course. I always have to put in a little plug for that. My online course, I have a let's go to where that is. If I go to the online course, I put up, after I have all the lessons on note input, I have a an exercise, which is a Bach piece. Well, I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. I'll show it to you later. And then I show you my version of the Bach piece, and then encourage you to upload your own, and people are starting to do that, and then, you know, hopefully we'll get people commenting on each other's versions and kind of helping each other out. So that's the kind of thing that I'm going to be encouraging in the online course on how to use MuseScore. Next year, I hope to be launching some online courses, basically doing what I'm doing here, but in a more structured way, so I don't just sit here and ramble. But really teaching these fundamentals of music theory and composition and arranging. And then I'll do the same thing of providing exercises. Anyhow, let me just do a couple more measures because I do have some points that I want to make. And also, I guess the chord symbols aren't really so relevant here. What I could do, since I know I'm not going to be using chord symbols, I'll show you, if you're not familiar with the selection filter. And what I can do is just uncheck chord symbols from the selection filter. And now, whenever I copy and paste, you'll see the chord symbols didn't come along for the ride. I'm going to undo that because I just remembered I also don't want the lyrics to come through. So, I have to reselect it. The selection filter is applied on the selection before you do the copy. So if you change the selection filter, you redo the copy part, and now paste. There we go. Now I just have my melody notes. So here I want to do my 5 and 10 kind of thing, but again, I want to think a little bit about voice leading, and this D here is the key note that I want to get. That's the 7th. That's going to be the note that I'm going to add here. So if I go to voice 2 and add a D, and now here in this measure, I'm going to have the same issue I had in this measure where there was nothing moving. I solved it here using the left hand, but I'm going to solve it here at least partially with the right hand doing a suspension. So I'm going to enter a quarter note D and then resolve it to C sharp. And double the length of it. All right. I never used to use the W and Q commands, but I'm becoming a fan of them now. It lets me correct some errors pretty quickly. Like I entered. Let me just do that again in slow motion so you can see what I did. What I did was I had entered. Let me go back even one step further. I went quarter note and then D, and then I jumped the gun and entered the C before remembering, oh, I need it to be a half note. Well, that's okay. The W command will double the length of the most recently entered note. It actually doubles based on what's here. So quarter note is selected, it'll make it a half note. And then I can raise the pitch. So if you accidentally enter a note with the wrong duration, the Q command halves duration, W doubles it. Shift Q shortens it but uses dots, so it'll go from a quarter note down to a dotted eighth. Shift W lengthens it using dots, so from a quarter note, so let me go back here. W made a half note. If I undo that, and then do Shift W, you see it adds the dot. So anyhow, I want to do that again, and then W, half note. There we go. So now I've created a little motion here. This is called a suspension. And I could actually have it be tied across. That's a conventional way of doing suspensions, but it's really nice actually to sound the notes together. So I'm going to do a 5 and 10 here also. Now in this case, the E compared to the F is going to have just a step lower for the first note, and then this time I could go with the octave, and I think I'm going to, because if I went with the 10th, it's just going to double the melody note, and I don't need that. So I think I am going to use that. But now when I get to the A chord, I'm going to, how low do I want that? I think that's low enough, A. So A, and then E. And now at this point, I have a choice. If I go for an A, I've got another root. If I go for the C sharp, I'm just doubling that note. That's not really doing me any favors. I would really rather hear a G here. I'd rather hear the 7th of that chord. So. Now, my original harmonization, I had this B flat in there. I would love to get that B flat in there still. So, but before I do that, I have to kind of think about where it's going to go. Because if I try to add that B flat here. Like one of the things that I might try to do is make this a quarter note and then add a B flat here. I can play that. Now that B flat desperately wants to go down to an A here, but I can't play an A at the same time as that D. My hand is not big enough to do that for sure. So I would have to accept this B flat, this flat 9 not resolving, but I have another hand. So if I can make that A work here, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to think about entering that A here. And now I just need, the root is an important note too, but the root is in the melody. Maybe I'm okay with the root not being in the bass for this chord. Or maybe I put it just here. I'm going to try it both ways on the piano and see which feels better. That's actually not bad. So if I go, if I add a D to this chord, and then here add an F, that creates reasonable voice leading. What I don't have is the motion, because now that I've played these two chords together, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do here. I could wait on the D and see, maybe arpeggiate this chord down, A, F, D. I might try that actually. Versus I'm trying out a few different things. You probably can't see what I'm doing because my back is blocking it. Maybe you can hear it. What I did is I tried a few different variations. I tried this one. I don't need voice 2. All right, so I tried this. So that's actually not bad. That's a simple solution. So I could live with that, I really could. It keeps the same texture here of single note lines, quarter notes, without having to play two together. But the other thing that I did that I actually liked quite a bit was, let me go here and add in voice 2 a D. And then what I did was I created a moving line here in parallel sixths. So I'm going to delete these two Fs and instead go to voice 2 and enter my F there. So this interval here from A to F is a sixth. Parallel sixths are a pretty cool thing. And so if I go F, G, A, and then here go B, C. This is a really nice texture. It's really a very choral thing to do, like a choir arrangement. But it works on piano too. But this idea of having the alto and tenor move together in either thirds or sixths is quite powerful. So that, and it just so happens that I ended up with basically a chord here, the chord I wanted to have, the root, the fifth, the seventh of my D minor chord. The third I kind of lost. I'd have to think about whether I want to repeat the third here, or I could maybe think about bringing this back down to an A. Like if this goes back down to an A, then this G could go back down to an F, but then I don't get my seventh, and I really kind of like the seventh. So I'm just going to leave it that way. Finishing this line out, I'm going to go back to my 5 and 10. Now, and again, I could go up to the 10th, but since the melody note is already the third of the chord, then I think I'm just going to go with a root, and then I feel like contrary motion. So I just did this little parallel thing here. I feel like I want the melody, this alto line, to come back down while this bass line is going up. Now this line is now hung out to dry, right? This is going nowhere. I kind of need it to come back down to a B or up to a D, but neither of which I can really feel comfortable playing in my left hand. So I think, ooh, is that what I want? That's for me. Is that for me, or is that just, see, I already closed the dang window is the deal. That was my chat window, and I think someone was telling me I could mute things, but in any case, whatever. Oh yeah, here's the comments on the exercise from my course. So the course lesson is, and again, I'm apologizing for my computer being so slow while I'm doing broadcasts, but here's a minuet, a Bach minuet that I give you an example of and then ask people to upload their versions of, and some people have gone ahead and done that. So here's one that someone submitted, and then we'll be able to go and look at his score and compare it to mine. And actually MuseScore 3 has a very cool score comparison tool that lets you compare two scores, and it'll tell you what's different about them. It'll tell you note by note if there's a different pitch, or if there's an accidental in one that's not in another, or some text, like the original didn't have this subtitle, I don't think. Yeah, so it'll point out that difference and so on. So that would be a nice use of that score comparison tool. Anyhow, back to what I'm doing here. What I can do is look at this A here. This A is actually also feels like it's going to that B. So I don't need to finish this alto line. I feel like that alto line is going to that B. So I got a spare finger here to really pick up that tenor line and really have the tenor line essentially move to my right hand. So I will go with a D. Okay, here we go. So, and then I'm like thinking about what this line goes. If I just move in stepwise motion, I didn't like what I got because the E against that D is not so pretty. But if I let the G happen here and then walk down through F, which is the 7th, and then I can see that E will be the natural place for that to resolve. And then since this line was going up, I think I'm going to continue it up and let it be kind of like this other place I had here where the line kind of continued upwards. And then do my, this isn't again a 5 and 10, it's an octave, a 5 and octave. And you want to not overuse the 5 and octaves, but if the melody note is already the 3rd, you really don't need the 3rd down here. So if I play this now, and then let me just finish out this line. C. By the way, you notice how it moved to the next, when I entered that note, the cursor moved forward, but that's okay. Just hit the left cursor and left arrow and you're back. Sorry about all that. Let me just enter an E onto this and call that good. And again, cursor back. You can also, here's something I implemented for the last release that some of you might like to know about. If you turn off this pan score button, now I can enter notes and it doesn't move the score at all. So the score view won't change as you enter notes. If you want to, you'll have to like scroll yourself. Anyhow, maybe I'll leave it off for now. See, because I never use it. I implemented it because people asked for it, but I haven't really tried living with it myself. So this 5 and 10 version here is pretty good. Let me, just because I see that I want to see 7, let me enter in voice 2 something like E, C. Yeah, see, I don't like that because the cursor moved forward, but the score didn't pan. Yeah, not good. That's not for me. But E, and then oh, how about if I go E, D, C, but then instead of going all the way up to the 10th here, I'll put my 7th here. Okay, that's good enough. So for my first line now, if I play the whole thing, I think this is the only place I added that 9th. I have to think about whether I would want to add more elsewhere, but so that's a pretty good start to a piano arrangement. The last thing I would do to this line is maybe change the rhythm of this pattern so it's not this steady stream of quarter notes. Like it could be very effective here, instead of having 3 quarter notes, to have, let's see, if I change this to an 8th note and then move this by copy or cut and then paste, and then add another one. Well, it's easier for me to think about it if I play it. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 is what I actually played. So 1, 2, and 3. There we go. And I created some motion in here. Oh, and then I did the same thing here, actually. I used that rhythm. And then so I went like this, and then I put the A, on beat 2. Beat 1, I actually played a C. No, actually on this one I did prefer it the way I had it before, which was the quarter note. Whoops. The quarter, I see, at half it. All right, fine. 5 for quarter note. Paste. Sometimes it's easier just to re-enter the note, but you know, people like to see how to edit things, so I'm trying to use that too. This one I actually liked the steadier stream. And so the same thing here, I feel like if I made that same dot pattern happen in there, I might like it better. Oops, I accidentally pressed the spacebar. So a little bit more motion here maybe. I'll just arpeggiate up that chord. What I really felt here was making this one dotted. And now that creates a little more motion. Nah, I don't think I like that actually. So let me undo that change. So that is the kind of thing that you would want to do. Those are the kinds of things I think about when I'm taking a basic harmonization like this and then trying to arrange it for piano. I showed you first, so the more basic, this is like a hymn style arrangement, but to make it a little more pianistic, I'm doing a lot of other things involving arpeggiation in the left hand, involving making sure that I can actually physically reach the things that I need to reach, making sure that lines like this line here continuing up to there is like you would actually want to notate that. There's a specific thing for that doesn't add the way I wish it did. Note anchored line it's called. If you notice, it adds it way too high because it was meant for a different purpose. But if I bring up the inspector, oops, try again, F8. If I bring up the inspector and I apply a 5-space offset, is what I've learned. It connects very directly note head to note head. So this is just a little indication to give, it doesn't mean anything, it just sort of lets you know as a performer, oh, this C logically connects to that D. You don't play it any differently really, it just helps you understand that, hey, that C was not actually left out to dry, it came here. So I'm going to save this the way it is, and this is first 8 bars done in a particular kind of piano style that's, I don't know, I find to be pretty effective piano writing. So I'm going to leave it at this, and anyone who wants to finish this, again, I'm going to later today post links. I'll upload my harmonization, post a link to things, and let you have at it if anyone else wants to try to complete this, or go back and maybe do the choral arrangement. Maybe people are more interested in doing that. I'd love it if people would post links to your own versions of this in the comments. Again, this has been a lot of fun for me this year doing these MuseScore cafes. I am going to take the next couple of weeks off, and then I will rejoin you in January. I forget when January, Wednesday, if I'm also going to maybe take the first Wednesday off in January, I'm not really sure. But then, we'll be back underway, and MuseScore 3 will be out, and I'll have plenty of new things to talk about, both in terms of MuseScore itself and, musically like this. So I hope that everyone has a fantastic Christmas season, and just enjoy making music. So with that, I will sign off and see you next year.